Hey, bookish people! It is boldly Govember. Matt at Paperback Junkie's great read along where you have to read one Star Trek novel in the month of November, which dovetails wonderfully into me doing NaNoWriMo, and also I got sick at the beginning of this month, and when I get sick, you go for the comfort reading, and definitely undemanding comfort reading. Star Trek is definitely the way to go. So yeah, this is all these Star Trek novels that I have that are kicking around the house are actually my partner's Star Trek novels. Strangely seems to focus on this fellow. I don't know why. Which actually I'm completely fine with. Yes. So this is Star Trek: Yesterday's Sun by A.C. Crispin. Her very first pro sale, apparently. There's an introduction from a fellow Star Trek author at the front of the book, Howard Weinstein, who of course mentions the title of his own book at the very first line of the introduction, but I'm sure very kind of him to give an introduction to actually the first Star Trek novel outside of all the movie tie-ins that made the New York Times bestseller list, probably thus signaling to those up above that, hey, there's some money to be made in these Star Trek novels. And now this Star Trek novel it takes place very much within the continuity of the actual show, or very close to. I think I have a feeling it's pre all the movie nonsense. I have to say I don't pay attention to that stuff, but that's the impression I get. This is a Star Trek novel that I don't know. I probably should be as a true Trekkie. I should go. Oh, he's Boris Vihalo has drawn him with this color, so it must mean he's at this particular timeline in the thing. However, whatever that is the case, Ensign Teresa McNair, fresh out of the academy, comes to Spock saying, "Hey, I found this stuff from all the stuff we downloaded from this planet that went supernova in all our yesterdays, a Star Trek episode of days past, and it's got this strange portrait in it." And indeed, Spock looks at the portrait, and it's of a fellow who's got Vulcan physiognomy, and Spock realizes, oh God. Back in this episode, he traveled back in time, slightly devolved into a more kind of human, passionate thing, ate meat, but more importantly, took up with Zarabeth. And, apparently there was results from his union with Zarabeth. Zarabeth stayed back in time because she had mind conditioning or whatever, so she couldn't leave. But apparently when he left Zarabeth, he also left another little part of himself that ended up becoming his son, trapped 5,000 years back in the past, and now they must travel. So of course, hey, I need to get back in the past. They go to they reference yet another TV episode, The City on the Edge of Forever, which is one of the big famous ones, where they use the Guardian of Forever to travel back in time and space in this case, to get to find. Oops, we kind of slightly miscalculated, and they ended up picking up a 20-year-old, 20 in his 20s, Zar, who is the son of Spock. Unfortunately, Zarabeth is out of the picture by this point. And yes, they bring him back. They bring him into the future, at which point the Romulans show up, and the Guardian of Forever is threatened, and we go from there. Now, Steve was talking about how, in these books, you can't really change the characters. You can't radically, introduce world-changing stuff into the thing. But in some ways, that's, Star Trek, the show was a corporate product. You weren't going to radically reboot the series in the middle of the series, at least not at this point. You weren't going to have, there's so many TV series now where they'll have, the final episode where, whatever will get blown up, and then the next season will start again somewhere entirely new. That's very new. That to me seems like a very new development. Back in the old days, these shows, they had a premise, they followed that premise, they got however many years doing that premise, and then once it was done, the show was done, and that was it. And the characters there was some slight alterations, but they didn't really change that much. What you had were guest stars, and Czar is, I'd say, a really good example of a great guest star. He's this young fellow who gets brought from being like, basically for the last couple of years, he was completely on his own and gets brought forward, has to deal with, oh my God, I've got a Vulcan for a father. And my mother had all these memories of him being a warm, caring person. And he's this icy cold Vulcan now because, of course, Spock at the time, when he went back in time, had devolved somehow. And so was passionate and full-blooded, such a fan. I'm sure that in itself was such a fan pleaser. But now he's this icy fellow who seems to be all about honor. And does he really care about me? And indeed, his fellows, Spock's fellows, McCoy and Kirk, sort of swoop in, and it sort of, to use another 80s reference in this 80s book, it's sort of a 3 men and a baby, except it's 3 men and, total hunky awesome young fellow Czar, where they're all fathers to him. And interestingly, it's not a book where there's written by a woman, but there's not like a lot of feminine presence. This is definitely about all kind of like different fathering techniques for Czar and helping him along, and him having a bit of teenage rebellion almost in there, not clashing with Spock and them, and so. This is a novel about Czar growing up and Czar kind of finding his destiny. And indeed, this has a book number 2, but Yesterday's Future or something like that. Oh, damn. I have it somewhere around here. I might read it. I don't know if I'll read it next or not, but so it's got a great arc for Czar where, it's still got good stuff for for Spock. And for Kirk and McCoy. It's funny, Kirk I actually like a lot better in these novels than I like him on the show. The good writers seem to they wrote Kirk as much more of a professional, kind of much more of a stable fellow in the books, where sometimes he seems like drama, and it's like he's like kind of wild and off the wall in the TV shows in a way that I found kind of growing up slightly laughable. Part of that is in the TV shows especially, that's William Shatner doing an older style of acting, and it's acting and all those dramatic pauses and that kind of weird cadence that he has, whereas someone like Leonard Nimoy was doing a much more measured tone. So in some ways I can see why he became much more of a fan favorite. That even that way he seemed more of a contemporary figure in a way. Okay. But so, it's funny. It's like, as I was reading the book, I was like, oh, this is a pretty good standalone book. It doesn't have too many references. And then as I come to do the review, I'm like, All Our Yesterdays is one episode. The City on the Edge of Forever is another episode. We run into a particular Romulan that calls back to the Enterprise incident, and he's got a grudge against Spock and Kirk. There's references to, I think it's Martin Blake, just an offhand reference like, oh, you're looking like Martin Blake and acting like him a little bit too. And it's like, I would have had no clue. This is one of the wonderful things. At the time I probably read this, I went, oh, okay. And just kind of passed by, because I'm not a true encyclopedic Trek fan. And I have no idea who they're talking about. Also not great with names, but now I can look it up online, and it's like, this is who Martin Blake is, and get the whole like little summary of his thing, and well, slightly jog my memory. Slightly, I don't remember it all because I haven't watched the old episodes for a long time. But there's there's a lot of references, a lot of, this is very much could be, it's a TV show where I guess it is a good TV episode, I would say. I can't say that this is like, interweaving plots and complex. It's like, no, this is a really solid episode of the television show that we never got to see, that we we got to have it in the book form, which, as I was growing up in the 80s, and I think we started having the movies, but the movies were well spread out, and the movies had their own focus where you didn't get to have these episodes of the week and have little guest stars, which is what I sort of enjoyed about the show, and have them interact and draw out different aspects of the people in it. So yeah, it's like, it's nothing earth shattering in Star Trek. I can see why it was the bestseller though, because I think it's like, this fed a need for, I want more episodes of this TV show, and the books gave it to me, without the cheesy acting and the cheesy special effects that, when I came to it, confession time. I think I spent a lot of time watching the older episodes, and while there's an intellectual part, like, oh, you know, it's interesting ideas, there's also just a lot of making fun of the acting and making fun of the effects. And yeah, so there's a strong cheese factor for me for these episodes, because it was before my time, as which now I'm sure I go back and I'd watch The Next Generation, which I did enjoy. Once we got into like season 3, I was enjoying an unironic way, which I would probably, and now I've seen episodes and it's a lot of that is irony for me too. So yes. So I don't know how many tribbles out of 5 I would give this. I'll leave that to the experts like Steve Donoghue. But yes, a good TV episode. Not like it's one of these small episodes that they have along the way. It's not your season ending episode. This is definitely like a good solid episode of Star Trek. So who knows? Maybe the Govember is still young. I could get sick again. I could get so bogged down and snowed under by my NaNoWriMo that I'll need a break. And Star Trek novels are definitely a lovely break. My printed in Canada version of Yesterday's Sun. Yes, because that was very important in the 80s, that something was printed in Canada by this American corporation. More videos later.